By the time it would have taken
Oh
you
my
to get those,
gosh.
I'm already done.
My gosh.
All right.
Science.
Now let's try. Welcome back to the podcast, Redeemed. We are in Samuel.
Yes.
First
First Samuel.
First Samuel.
The third chapter, if you're keeping track.
And what we talked about last time was the birth of Samuel. How his mom had prayed and prayed and prayed and prayed and prayed and prayed and finally got answered. Gave her a son, and she basically, gave him back to the Lord.
So she fulfilled her end of the deal.
Yeah, I was going to say donate, but that's not quite what I was, that's not the
What you
word I
said
was looking
last
for.
time, and it just
Yeah.
wasn't. Just didn't sound right.
She didn't
Just
drop
didn't
him off at
quite-
Goodwill.
Yeah. No, she gave him back to the Lord because that's the promise she made him.
Yep.
So now we have this boy. He's growing up. He's working with Eli, and the Lord is fixing to do some pretty big things with him. Have you ever been called to something? Because ultimately, that's what's going to happen here in this chapter.
Mm-hmm.
Is Samuel's going to get calling?
Yeah.
I've been called.
I was going to say, I think I was called to teaching.
I would say that I've been called to preach and to do ministry. I don't think like it's been like thou shalt preach, but I know that I was called to ministry.
Right.
And then the Lord has opened doors for other things in my life that I've just walked through. But that one for sure I know was a calling.
I had too many doors open pushing me towards teaching for it to be a coincidence.
I know. Doesn't that suck? That's what happened to me too. It's like, oh man.
I understand that.
There was way too many
I kept
things.
trying to close the doors,
Yeah.
but God was like, nah, this is what you're doing.
Yep. And ultimately, I would say that's probably for all of us here in this room. You know, even with my job at Steelscape, God opened the doors and boom, there I was.
Yeah,
You know what
I
I'm saying?
tried to go do other things.
So did I. Yeah, but here we are.
Here we go.
Just like that, here we are.
Here we are. So, calling are important. I think it, in some ways, gives us a little more purpose in what we do because we know that is where God has placed us and He has a mission for us to accomplish there. And I think if we keep that in the forefront of our mind, it keeps us sometimes from getting burnt out at what we do
Yeah.
because we understand that God has placed us there.
Correct.
Even when we don't want to be there sometimes. I mean, don't get me wrong, but God has placed us there for a reason, and so we have to serve and we have to do the best that we can. Samuel is fixing to be called, but not quite in the traditional way of being called for something.
No, he's legitimately going to get called.
Yep, literally, God's going to call his name Samuel. And so that's what we have going on here. It sounds like, from what I'm reading here, it's in the middle of the night almost. Okay, I don't know what part of the night, but let's go with middle of the night.
Yeah.
And
3 in the morning.
3 in the morning, I like that.
That's a terrible time to be awake.
It is. It is.
Been there.
Then I get Eli's frustration.
Yeah, I do too. Because I have a kid, that wakes me
Yeah.
up at 3 o'clock in the morning. I understand his
Because if it was
frustration.
like 11, it's like, all right,
Yeah,
But 3 in the morning, you're like, go away.
it's true. I was sleeping. You woke me up.
Yeah. That was my REM cycle.
Yeah. So anyway, God calls him, literally, Samuel. Kid gets up, goes to Eli. He doesn't know what's going on.
Yeah.
So he goes into Eli. You called me.
Yeah.
Eli's like, no, I didn't call you. Go back and lay down. Like I said, it's 3 o'clock in the morning, according to what Amanda said.
I don't know. I just picked a time.
All it says is one night Eli, whose eyes were becoming so weak that he could barely see, was lying down in his usual place.
Mhm.
Lamp of God had not yet gone out. Samuel was lying down in the house of the Lord where the ark of God was. Then the Lord called Samuel.
Yep. Like I said, then he ran to Eli. Eli said, I didn't call you, go back to bed.
Yep.
God calls him again. Samuel. And when I read this in my head, I always think God's got that deep voice,
Yeah.
Samuel.
Yeah. I also like to think that it was just enough time that Eli fell back asleep.
Yeah.
And then he called Samuel again. Then
Yeah.
he went back to Eli.
Yeah.
He goes back to Eli. You called me. Eli's like, nope, didn't call you. Go back to sleep. So Samuel goes back to his room or wherever he was sleeping and goes back to sleep.
Yep.
God calls him a third time. Samuel.
Back to Eli.
So here I go.
Back to Eli.
Sam's probably getting frustrated with Eli at this point. I know that you must think this is funny,
Yeah.
but I'm here.
Let it go. No one's
Uh-huh.
laughing.
Yeah. Now Eli begins to catch on.
Yes.
And he realizes that it's the Lord calling Samuel. And he says, this time when you hear it, say, speak, for your servant is listening, I believe is how he's put it.
Speak, Lord, for your servant is listening.
which I always really like that. That's kind of one of those things in my life that I've kind of grabbed onto.
Uh huh.
When the Lord is speaking, speak. Servant's
Yep.
listening, as best I can. Sometimes I don't listen so well, but I try, So Samuel does what he's told, takes a suggestion. And and at some point you have to realize too that Samuel's not very old.
Yeah.
It's not like he's a 20-year-old, I don't think.
Yeah, no, I wish I had. I just don't have any idea. I'm looking through the commentaries here. Don't really see anything about his age at this exact time.
But the way it portrays it is he's not very old yet.
I would say maybe he's a teenager.
Yep, that's what I was thinking.
But I have nothing to go off of.
And so this time the Lord calls him, Samuel, Samuel. And he says, speak, Lord. For your servant's listening.
Attaboy, Samuel. Nailed it.
Mm-hmm. And then the Lord begins to talk to him and begins to explain to him what basically his life is going to look like after this point. That in a huge way, God was going to use him to lead and guide Israel.
Yeah.
In
Now-
detail.
Mm-hmm. And I like the way it says, and the Lord said to Samuel. Let's read it, because I think it's pretty cool the way the Lord says it. See, I am about to do something in Israel that will make the ears of everyone who hears about it tingle. Okay? That's a pretty powerful statement. So
Make
I
your
don't,
ears
know,
tingle.
I don't know what law God's fixed to lay down, but it's
You better listen.
probably not going to be
Yeah.
good.
You better be locked in.
Mm-hmm. And then he begins to talk about Eli. He says, at that time I will carry out against Eli everything I spoke against his family from beginning to end. For I told him that I would judge his family forever because of the sin he knew about. The sin he knew about. What was the sin? It was his sons.
His sons blasphemed God, and he failed to restrain them.
Mm-hmm.
Therefore I swore to the house of Eli, the guilt of Eli's house will never be atoned for by sacrifice or offering.
Oof.
That's a lot.
That's
Parenting matters.
Yes, it is.
Yeah.
But that's a lot to lay on a kid,
Yeah. Especially you've been hanging out with Eli for a few years now,
Yeah.
and you're like, man, I kind of like this guy.
Yeah. And from all aspects of what we can read, Eli basically took care of Samuel. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
He was raising him basically. Mm-hmm. So then after he hears all this, what does Samuel do? Samuel goes and lies down. Doesn't say that he fell back asleep, because I don't think he was sleeping much after that.
No, probably not.
Okay. And then in the morning, Eli calls him and says, Samuel, my son. Samuel answered, here I am. And then what does Eli ask? What did the Lord tell you?
What'd he tell ya?
And it looks like Samuel was a little hesitant to tell him because he's a little afraid.
Well, I think Eli I was reading the commentary here, because Eli also says, do not hide it from me. May God deal with you, be it ever so severely, if you hide from me anything he told you.
So
Jeez.
Eli knew it was coming.
Well, and so I was reading the commentary, and it says, why did Eli threaten Samuel? Fair. Presumably Eli recognized that God had bypassed him to give a rare revelation to Samuel. Even so, Eli was still the high priest, and Samuel was still under his supervision, so Eli asked Samuel for the whole truth. Fair.
That makes sense.
Everything checks out that way.
Yep,
Yeah.
I agree. No, I believe that's probably exactly the way it went down.
Mm-hmm.
I think the commentaries are
Yep, and then so Samuel told him.
Yep. And I love Eli's response. So he told him the truth exactly, that his house was going to be wiped out, and that this was all coming against him because of the sins that he had allowed to happen. And what does Eli say? He is the Lord. Let him do what is good in his eyes. I mean, there's not much you really can say.
What other
Yeah.
response are you going to have?
I mean, but
Yeah.
it doesn't say that he got mad or he got angry or
Just like, okay.
fell down and started crying and
Yeah.
begging the Lord, I'm sorry. No,
Yeah.
he just...
I mean, he
the
had to know
Lord-
something was coming.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah, I don't think this was a surprise.
And I just like the way he put it, though. He is the Lord. Let him do what is good in his eyes.
Mhm.
I mean, that's a pretty powerful statement.
Yeah.
For sure.
So even though Eli messed up and he knew his end was coming, he still trusted and believed in the Lord.
Yeah.
You know? And knew the Lord was going to do what he had to do. Now, I feel sorry for Eli to a point. I understand that a lot of the reason he was where he's at is because he didn't do the things he was supposed to do.
Yeah.
Okay? I get that.
But still.
But still, it's pretty rough.
Yeah.
is.
And it was at that point, and from that point on, that the Lord began to use Samuel in very, very mighty ways.
Yeah.
Okay. So calling, very important. Granted, most of us are probably not going to be called with a, Asa.
It'd be cool though.
It would be cool.
Yeah.
And simpler, if the Lord showed up and said, hey, this is exactly what I want you to do, I don't have to try to figure it out. Okay, Lord, I know, all right, we're
Got
going.
it.
I'll do it. Got it. Done.
Be very simple.
But callings are very important, and I believe the Lord gives everybody a calling. He puts them in a place where they're supposed to serve and do something. Sometimes I think that we get so busy with the day-to-day stuff that we forget about that. And it becomes more of a day in, day out instead of something the Lord has given us to accomplish.
Yeah.
So my encouragement to you after reading that chapter is, what is your calling? And if you haven't found one, find it, figure it out, and start serving the Lord the best way you can.
If you got no idea, ask God.
Yeah.
He knows your calling.
Absolutely. And everybody's got the basic calling of serving the Lord.
That's a fact.
I mean, just at the very, very basic of it, we've all been called to share the gospel. So, callings are important.
Yeah.
So, thank you once again for another wonderful example set by Samuel.
Yes.
And I hope you guys have a great week, and we'll see you next time.